Pranita, are you writing the paper? Respond, please. It seems to be. Guys, you're able to hear me, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Okay,
sir.
because I was trying to get in touch with Pranita Kulkarni, who joined later. Okay, forget about what happened. So I just took the people who have submitted. I have downloaded their marks with, and that is with me. So if anybody is submitting after this, I will know who has submitted late. So I don't mind submission till the end of day, but I will accordingly evaluate those marks, those papers. Even if you got 20 out of 20, I may deduct 2 marks, 3 marks according to the time taken. So perfectly fine. I think I should continue the session, correct?
Sir, can you
Guys,
please confirm who get 9-1?
you want to you
Sir,
want
show the
me to
marks.
confirm? Okay, what I'll do is that I'll
Yes, yes, sir.
confirm the people who submitted or whose marks I have with me. Names I will tell you at this point of time. I am not revealing the marks.
Sure, sure.
So people who have submitted is Yogita, Srishti, Karan, Soman, Mangesh, Apurva Jakam, Swati, Swapnil, Anita, Snehal, Rahila, Shreya, Priyanka, Rachel, Neha, Kajal, Sujit, Saili, Pankaj, Muhammad Islam, Shalini, Nisha, Jugal, Tripti, Durga. This many I have received.
Okay, sir. Thank you for the
Okay, sir.
confirmations.
Okay, fine. So I am continuing with the session. We have another half an hour. We will discuss a little more on, again, more from uh, what do you call advice perspective rather than uh, policy framework or any of those things. So basically, looking at why such problems emerge. So one of the issues or one of the reason people talk about is the traditional cost benefit model is a problem. Cost benefit model or utilitarian perspective. 1 minute. Let me just see. हाँ बेटा बोलो. अच्छा तू आगे कर. उबर लेके जाओ. बाय. हाँ. Okay. So one of the problem is the utilitarian perspective, which talks about cost benefit analysis. So if the benefit is more than the cost, then the action gets justified. You remember the utilitarian perspective, maximum happiness, consequentialism, etc. So that creates a problem for there's always a comparison, relativeness to decision making or the right and wrong of a particular decision. So ethical decision making in social research should be modified to emphasize the outcome of both doing and not doing the research, and also the possibilities of doing the research in another manner. So when you're looking at the cost benefit analysis, it's also possible what are the various options that you have. You need to find out all the options and take the best options. That is one of the things people talk about, and oftentimes utilitarian principle which is used by a large number of people to decide what is the right thing or wrong thing to do, it creates moral dilemmas. It creates a lot of moral dilemma. If you use the deontological perspective or categorical imperative, there is no moral dilemma there. There is always this is what to do and this is you are not supposed to do. So there is a clear cut definition as to what is expected and what is not expected. So rule says don't do this, don't do that. That's simple as that. However, when it comes to utilitarian way of looking at it, leads to moral dilemma, and that is where you need to make a decision. And when you make a decision, the expectation is that you look into all the options. And the problem with a utilitarian perspective, again, as I said in the larger last class, was that there is a bounded rationality. So our decision making capacity is limited by many factors. One we said is the cost part of it. We also talked about the time part of it, cost, time, various other factors. There are a lot of limiting factors, or your expertise. So these are all factors that limits. So that's something that we need to look into. Uh, so I think I should. Um, hmm. So, what are the sources of ethics? Science is both a social institution and a profession. As a social institution, science is a social arrangement that encompasses activities in which different parties, say for example research institutes, funding agencies, publishers, ethics committees, etc., these are at various parties that is involved in doing the research. Each one fulfill their distinctive roles, often acting cooperatively for the achievement of common purpose. And this can be a cross discipline, cross cultural, cross discipline, interdisciplinary, etc., etc., and also uh, international studies. So science is based on trust and cooperation. A researcher must be able to trust one another. Their research must be trustworthy and society must be able to trust the scientist. So the moment trust is lost, then nobody will start believing in your research. And this is what happened to large number of India as a whole. When the international research bodies felt that India, the research papers that are coming out of Indian continent or Indian subcontinent, there's a high number of retraction that is happening. In terms of proportionately, if you look at, probably India is the highest, what do you call, country that has got retractions. Absolute numbers, it will be China and US, because they also, the number of publication are also much bigger in number. So there is a general distrust. So when tomorrow when you submit a paper to a journal, there is a high possibility that they will not even look at your paper, they will outrightly reject your paper, because the trust has been lost somewhere. It's important to rebuild the trust. Now, one of the thing I realize is that if I collaborate with a researcher from, let's say, South Africa, there's a higher possibility of that paper getting accepted, because the trust factor in the international research body of a researcher from South Africa is more. So there is a higher expectation that a researcher from South Africa will, the possibility of him getting engaged or getting into an unethical research is much lesser than if somebody from India. So the experience of people across is that your paper gets desk rejected, and even if you have written a good paper, your paper gets desk rejected because the trust factor is missing. There is this very famous post-modern thinker. I don't know, you are familiar. Are you familiar with this concept of what is modern, what is post-modern, etc., etc.? So this post-modern thinking is generally understood as a set of, a thinking pattern which is critical, or what they call a postmodern contribution. So you should not accept anything at face value. You should be able to deconstruct, question everything. So there is no absolute knowledge, there is no absolute truth about anything in the world. Everything has to be questioned, everything has to be vetted. So, Jacques Derrida is a French philosopher who has written a lot on what do you call on this concept of postmodernism. He talks about the factors impacting university research. Now he says there is something called an epistemic subjectivity of the researcher. So if you remember the epistemology, we said epistemology is the knowledge. So we all have certain biases. We have certain our own standpoints that we take, our own thinking pattern, our own perceptions, etc., and that impacts our research. So what this is that epistemic subjectivity, the knowledge, the say for example, amongst those who are sitting in this particular class, there will be someone who has got an affiliation to Congress, someone who has an affiliation to BJP, someone who may be an RSS functionary, somebody who is a Muslim. Now, each one of you look at CJP and the whole controversy that, I mean, the whole movement that has happened from different perspective, correct? And we all look at that one particular thing and write different theories, different theses. So somebody who is supporting BJP would look at CJP as a kind of anti-national activity, whereas somebody who is a Congress person would say that this is the best thing that's happened in the country for the last 10-15 years, and for the first time democracy becomes alive, etc. So everybody has their own way of looking at it, and that is what we call epistemic subjectivity. So our subjective way of looking at the reality is different. Everyone has got, and this has got an impact in the way we conduct research. Our research is very much affected, even if it is computer science. So somebody, when they were training the AI, they said AI is biased against certain. There is algorithmic bias people talked about, algorithm that are racial, that are misogynic, etc., etc. happen. Why does that happen? That comes from the epistemic subjectivity of the person who trained that machine. I hope you are understanding what I'm saying. So what Derrida says is that epistemic subjectivity of the researcher definitely impacts the way he conducts research. And that is what I was telling about. My researcher used to throw the paper back at me and says, your research is reeking with your own political thinking, Shaji. Happens. Then pragmatic application of result or the payoff. Another factor is that every faculty, say for example in symbiosis, you are all going to do PhD and you're going to do research and publish papers. And what is the reason for you publishing the paper? You need your PhD thesis to complete it. If you don't have those two papers, you will not be able to complete your PhD. So your whole focus is to get published. That's it. How you're writing, what is the merit of your writing, nobody is going to look at. So a lot of time it is completing PhD becomes an important factor. Or if you have got a funding from some agency, so within that funding period you have to complete your paper. Or some funders wants you to come out with a very an outcome that favors the funding agency. Payoff, pragmatic application of the result. Then he talks about pre-directed outcomes of inquiry. So a lot of research already starts with the assumption that this is going to be that. I mean, this is the outcome that I want to bring in. And we all have this hypothesis, isn't it? The hypothesis we had already decided even before we started research, and then we want to prove that hypothesis. Then they talk about competing interests situated outside the rationale of the institution. So oftentimes institution के बाहर का factors that also can have an impact on your research outcome. So say for example, um, imagine a scenario that your country at this point of time wants you to focus on a particular kind of research. Say, for example, a research that talks about Indian knowledge system. So there is a focus that is not controlled by the institution. The state wants you to start looking at Indian knowledge system. So you have no choice, or you think that is going to be something that is going to help you, get a grant, a research fund, etc. So those are interests that will force you to choose a particular kind of research, or a line of research. Then of course the fact like future expectations of its profitable utilization. So for an IT person, you are coming out with an algorithm, and if that algorithm is you can patent or you copyright that algorithm, so there is a profitability coming into. So patenting, copywriting is also a factor for you to conduct research. So the more the patent, the better respectability that you get, the better promotions that you get, etc., etc. And of course, there are interest group. There are certain vested interests that force you to do a research. So, so these are all what Derrida says that has got an impact, that impacts the research outcome of a university researcher. And in all these things, therefore, you are supposed to uh, be in, that research integrity you need to keep in mind. So research integrity may be defined as an active adherence to the ethical principles and professional standards essential for the responsible practice of research. So by active adherence we mean adoption of the principles and practices as a personal credo, not simply accepting them as impositions by rule makers. By ethical principle we mean honesty, the golden rule. So that is, treat others. The golden rule in research, if anybody says what is the golden rule in research, what it means is that treating others as you want to be treated, which means never use others for your benefit. Then they talk about trustworthiness and high regard for scientific record. So these are some of the basic factors that people talk about when they talk about um, research ethics. So honesty and fairness in proposing, performing, and reporting research, accuracy and fairness in representing contributions to research proposal and reports, proficiency and fairness in peer review process, collegiality in scientific interactions, communications, and sharing of resources, etc. So I hope you are understanding. The first two I had, you don't have a problem. The third is every good research journals, they have a peer review system. So you send a paper and they will send it to three other people who are expert in that particular field, and they will review a paper and say whether paper is good, bad, needs to revise, etc. Collegiality is you creating community of researchers, and that community, say today we have something called open access, or DOAJ they call it, open access journals. That is one way of creating a collegiality. So there are various sites where researchers can come together, they can help each other to write better papers, etc., etc. So then people talk about it's important that you need to disclose the conflict of interest. So when you're publishing a research paper, you have to tell these are the people who funded my research, and then you say that there may be a conflict of interest, possible conflict of interest, so that you declare everything. There should not be anything hidden. That is the basic thing about good research. Protection of human subjects in the conduct of research. We discussed on this humane care of animals in the conduct of research. Mostly for medical research, this is used. Adherence to mutual responsibilities of mentors and trainers. So you and your guide should have a very good relationship, and that is very important for again conducting a very good research. So you may not agree with everything your guide says, but then respect the guide and always be in a good relationship with your guide. So while science encourages vigorous defense of one's ideas and work, ultimately research integrity means examining the data with objectivity and being guided by the results rather than the preconceived notions. So I have quite a lot of slides that I have put. It's about self-explanatory guide. I mean slides. So I don't want to go into details of each of these, what that means. So uh, coming to the next major factor, um, when we talk about scientific misconduct or major problems in a research, these are considered three major, especially from IT, management, etc. These are the three major areas in which scrutiny is done in these days. So when you write a paper and send it for publication, these are the three major factors. We discussed quite a lot of things. Those are all expected that you follow. Let's say before you start research, you have an uh, approval from your IEC, etc. All those things are there. But when you send your paper for publication, they will say whether you have plagiarized, how much AI is there, etc., etc. Those are the things that are very important that you need to keep in mind. So let's look at what plagiarism is. I'm sure you are all familiar with this concept of plagiarism, isn't it? Plagiarism is representing someone else's work or ideas as your own, with or without their consent, by incorporating it into your work without full acknowledgement. All published and unpublished material, whether in manuscript, printed, or electronic form, is covered under the definition. Plagiarism may be intentional or reckless or unintentional. Under the regulations for examinations, intentional or reckless plagiarism is a disciplinary offense. So you read somewhere and a particular idea, and then when you were doing your writing, you had that in your mind, but then you are not able to locate exactly where it came from, and then you included it. It is accepted, condoned. They will not make a big issue out of it. But if you copy, let's say, 4 pages or 2 pages from that person's article, and then you did not even tell you have taken it from where, it is punishable. So your paper can be the immediate the punishment that you get is that your paper will be rejected, or your paper, if it is published, it will be retracted. So I'll talk about the consequence of doing this a little later. So possible reason for plagiarism, what people talk about is that there is, very high pressure on publication, um, ease of copying and pasting online work. In the earlier days when I was a graduate student, I had to sit in the library, read the research papers, copy the materials, etc., etc., and it was a tedious job. Today, I just need to sit in my room, and you can, you know, access n number of journals and number of books. And if journals and searching through journals is a problem, I just ask ChatGPT, I get everything. So research has become easy, and that is another reason why people tend to take or misuse the system. Difficulties in writing English, and especially a lot of us who are not people from what do you call it, native English speaking people. We are all, we have all learned how to speak English, and therefore we take help from various tools. We sometimes realize that copying is better than writing on your own. uh, Problem. Misplaced respect for others' work. This is a big problem in India. We don't care. We don't care about other. And there is also a tendency to use others as a means for my growth. So when I don't respect others, it doesn't matter for me if I copy or not copy, etc. So it becomes a kind of, I'm not even feeling conscious. I don't even have a conscious, a kind of a prick of the conscience. It doesn't impact me. And then, of course, lack of suitable training. Nobody has told you that this is wrong. And lack of awareness of the rules. You have not read any of those, COPE or IEEE or any journals, ethics. Every journal has got a publication ethics section. So those are things that we need to do it. So these are some of the possible reason why we get into copy, paste, plagiarize somebody else's work, etc., etc. So what are the various types of plagiarism that research community accepts as important? They say verbatim, that is word for word quotation without clear acknowledgement. So if you're going to copy a sentence, even a sentence, or even a phrase from somebody without acknowledging it, it is considered plagiarism. Cutting and pasting, paraphrasing, even if you have paraphrased a paragraph from somebody, says, so and so says A, B, C, D things, again, you need to give a citation. Collusion, you collude with, let's say, another thing a lot of people they do is that 3 4 people they write papers and they cite each other's papers, randomly. So those are another factor people talk about: collusion, inaccurate citations. You write a paper, a passage, and then you say your previous work is cited for that. So a lot of people, what they do is, I wrote a paper, I need to increase my citation. So every time I write, subsequent papers, each time I write another paper, I cite all my previous works in that paper, whether those papers are related to this current paper or not, either immaterial, I cite those papers. So what they also call, this is a self citation, and self citation is also considered a wrong practice. Failure to acknowledge assistance. You did a research and then a lot of people helped you in the process, and you do not give credit to any of those people. That is also a way of plagiarizing, because you've taken the help and you don't acknowledge that. Use of materials written by professional agencies or other persons. So there are a lot of white papers available, company reports, etc., and then you quote from those things and you don't cite them. That is again a problem. And of course there is auto plagiarism. So when you use Symbiosis word, Symbiosis International Deemed University, and whenever you are writing a paper and you are going to publish a paper, you have to use the word Symbiosis International University. Now that will automatically consider as a plagiarism. So there are filters available with which you can remove all these things. But in general, all these are considered different types of plagiarism. Now, any questions so far on plagiarism, or types of scope and types of plagiarism? If you have any question, let's discuss. If you want to share an experience, you are welcome. Otherwise, we'll go ahead. Hmm. Nothing. Huh. See, when you use a Turnitin, there are certain filters. The filters will tell you these words. So you can either select those words and say that don't include these words, or you say that any kind of set of words, let's say uh, 6 words together or 7 words together, anything that is less than 7 words together, you filter it out. Then automatically all those things will be removed from your plagiarism report. So these filters, I will talk about these filters when I discuss the plagiarism tool later.
So I have a question. Like if
Yes.
we have checked our paper in any of the tool and we have found that there is no plagiarism or any AI content, is
Hmm.
it will that be okay to publish that paper or the what we say publisher or the they will have their own system to check again like that something?
Publishers generally have their system, and most common tool that Springer and so on use, what they say is that authenticate or turn it in. Either of these is considered the most appropriate tool for doing, checking the plagiarism. So since Symbiosis, we follow Turnitin, but
Okay.
many international people they use Authenticate also. Yes, Sujit.
Okay, thanks. So means once
So,
we get report, positive report in Turnitin, it's fine to
huh.
publish. We
So
make
if
sure.
you get a positive report in Turnitin, you can definitely go ahead and submit. There's no problem.
Thank you.
Nobody should have a problem. Okay, good. Let's maybe another 10 minutes before we wind up. So, how does IEEE define plagiarism? Say it talks about self plagiarism is one of the thing IEEE talks about. Plagiarism without identification and acknowledgement. So, I have written a paper, and then next paper is a development of my first paper. But then I have quoted a lot of things that I have written in the first paper in my second paper. But then I don't say that it is in that paper. I don't cite that. And that is become a self plagiarism. Cutting and pasting of others' work without identification, acknowledgement, replication of methods section without clear statement of the source. Say, the methodology often what a lot of people do is that, if you are using a particular tool and technology, etc. So more or less it's going to be same. So instead of writing everything, a lot of people they cut and copy that article's methodology in this paper. And also sometimes you need to justify why I have used certain method over the others. I need to cite and justify. A lot of people don't do that. So that is again becomes a problem of plagiarism. Republication of conference papers with little added value as a another conference. So I wrote a paper and then published in one conference, and then I went to another conference without adding anything. I only changed the title of the paper, but then duplicate publication. So this is again called a plagiarism. Review papers which largely replicate previously published content. Plagiarism of images, tables, formula, data without both acknowledgement and copyright permission. Plagiarism of ideas, wholesale plagiarism of previously published text. A lot of PhD students आजकल उतना नहीं करते, पहले करते थे. What they used to do is that they used to go to these large universities. They have got previous years students, research papers. So they go back about 5 6 years and take one paper and wholesale reproduction in the new, and then thoda idhar udhar cosmetic changes, and then you submit, accept it. So in those days there were no software tools to check those things. So that's the problem. Republication in translation without acknowledgement. So you wrote a paper in Marathi and then you want to translate that into English and publish without acknowledging that it's a translation from so and so paper, that is considered a plagiarism. So this is how uh, IEEE talk about plagiarism. And how to check plagiarism, we have authenticate. Turn it in PubPeer, publicationethics.org. So a lot of software tools available. There are a lot of online free tools available, but we request everyone to use Turnitin as the plagiarism check tool for symbiosis research community. So we will talk about falsification later. So this is what we are expected to do.
Mm. So,
Yes.
can you tell the procedure how to publish your paper in a good journal? Already they have actually mentioned in the induction also, but how first we have to go through our guide, okay, and then they will suggest us where we have to publish it. How it is work?
Yes, Tripti, I will be taking an entire session. I mean, a number of sessions on publication ethics.
Okay.
In that one, I will be telling you how to publish, where to publish, what are the ways to, what are the do's and don'ts of publishing in peer-reviewed journals. All those details I'll be discussing with you.
Okay, sir. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can see the names of Prathamesh who says I also submitted. Amir Mit also says I also submitted. Your names are not there. Your names were not there in the list that I called out. Now I got about 30 responses. Okay, so a few more people have responded. Perfect. So thank you everybody for
Sir, question.
yes.
Uh, we were discussing about translating the papers. So I just want to know, is it possible to write a paper in different language? Means want to understand, like suppose somebody's the people from the Germany and Japan, are they writing paper in English only or they use their own language?
That's a good question. They write in, see, 90% of the Chinese researchers write in Chinese language.
So
And
how that
huh?
means how that research get in consideration means those who
And
don't know the Chinese.
they patent that in Chinese, and they copyright that in Chinese. And then, of course, they would be submitting an English version of that. So it becomes difficult for us to identify research that has been published in China in Chinese, uh, and and of course we will not be able to plagiarize their paper if we don't know what they have written. So we may have the same idea and then write in our language. It would generally considered a problem. But then what happens for us from an Indian perspective when we look at, I have written, and in my first article was written in English and it was published in a journal called Economic and Political Weekly. So it is a Scopus Index journal. Now that was translated into Marathi, I did not translate. I did not know Marathi. I got the paper translated by somebody and published that in a Marathi journal called Samaj Prabodhan Patrika.
Okay.
So when it was published in the Samaj Prabodhan Patrika, I had to acknowledge the fact the original was published in EPW on under this title. Okay, Sujit.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
answering to answer your question about how the Chinese and Japanese and Germans, etc. So Germans, see, most of the European languages, um, it is there is a simultaneous indexing that is happening, translations that is happening. So those are indexed and cited, kind of accepted out there. However, Chinese is a problematic. So they seems to be publishing under anything and everything in Chinese language, and then they are getting citations, etc. And most of these journals are also in Scopus. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, because if you see, most of the German journals are also there in the well-known journals are there. So I wanted to understand how their reviewer are reviewing our papers. If I try to publish a paper in German journal, how it will get reviewed?
So if it is a German journal, it generally the editors generally send it to English speaking people.
Okay. Okay.
So
So
there is
that
a large
the
pool of uh,
language of the paper, based on the language of the paper, it get
yes, they
reviewed.
generally send it to a person who knows the language.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
So there may be
Okay,
translator also, no, nowadays.
translators are there, but then if you send your paper to a German language journal,
Hmm.
then how do they review your paper? That was his question, correct, Sujit?
Yes, sir.
And that is where the editors send the paper to uh, English speaking people. There's a large pool of reviewers available now.
Yeah, because if we talk about the APC charges and everything, there are
Hmm.
lots of journals who are publishing the papers locally means, but they are in different regions. Somebody maybe in Europe or like that.
Absolutely.
So that is the thing I was talking about.
Yeah, correct. You're right. Hmm. Okay, thank you guys. Nice interacting with you.
Thank you, so.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Thank you so
sir.
much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.